Hello, my name is Amy Merkel, and I'm a counselor and the Transfer Center Director at Santa Rosa Junior College. And today I'm going to be going over a PowerPoint on the transfer basics designed for parents. So we know that parents are also invested in their children's education and want to be educated on what it takes to transfer. And so we want to provide basic information to parents on what they need to know about the transfer process. So congratulations, your baby is in college, and this is an exciting time, obviously, for you as a parent and for your child as well. And so there's just certain things that you want to understand as a parent on how the educational system changes once your student enters college. So the first thing to be aware of is FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And this is a federal law that protects the privacy of student educational records. And so once somebody turns 18 or is eligible to enroll at the community college because they have graduated high school, their educational records are protected. And so for you to come into the college without your child and ask for information, that information would not be granted. And so your child would need to be present or have given the okay for you to maybe speak to somebody in admissions and records or something like that about your child's records. It's just best to come in with your child so that they can be present. I know as a counselor there have been times where I will ask the student if it's okay for their parent to be in the counseling session, and the student has said no. And so the parent has had to wait out in the waiting area. A lot of times that first semester in college, the student does want their parent present to understand and hear what's going on. Maybe they're a little bit nervous, but it's the student's role to talk with the counselor and to explain why they're there and what information they're looking for. Typically after that first time, the student is fine coming in on their own and talking with a counselor about their educational plan. All right, so the transfer process. Students are starting here at Santa Rosa Junior College, and their goal is to move on to a four-year university to obtain their bachelor's degree. So at Santa Rosa Junior College, the students are working on their lower division requirements. Once the student transfers, they would work on their upper division requirements. So the lower division requirements to transfer are that the student have at least 60 transferable units to enter a CSU or a UC. The California private universities and the out-of-state campuses may not require 60 units, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, but the CSUs and UCs do require that students have 60 transferable units to transfer. So those 60 units, what are the students working on? One, they want major prep completed. So if your child is majoring in psychology, they need to prepare for that major by taking certain classes in the psych discipline. They're probably going to need statistics, maybe a biology class. And so there are certain courses that need to be done to prepare for the major and be ready to go into upper division courses for their major once they arrive at the university. The second thing students should be working on is their general education or admissions requirements to a campus. And then if the student has time, they can do elective courses if they're in a low unit major and they just need to have credits to reach that 60, then they could work on elective courses. Students can earn an associate's degree at Santa Rosa Junior College. It is not a requirement to transfer. However, many students do want to earn that associate's degree prior to entering the university. What we typically do with students is we work backwards to make sure that that makes sense for whatever major they're doing and that it is a streamlined process and that they are meeting the requirements for both transfer and the associate's degree. Once the student transfers, they're working on their junior and senior level courses. It's a minimum of 120 units to get a bachelor's degree. Some majors, especially in what we call the STEM area, the science, technology, engineering, and math, are going to require more units than that, but it's minimum of 120 units to earn that bachelor's degree. So once the student is at the university, they will be working on their upper division courses for their major. They still have to do upper division general education courses, which is typically 9 units. And then if the student decides to do a minor or possibly even double major, they would work on those requirements. And lastly, if they have the time or the room, they could complete that 120 through elective classes. All right, so the transfer process. The four-year universities, again, want your students prepared for their major. And so the first piece of this pie is to complete major prep courses. The second piece is then to work on general education or admissions requirements. And the third piece is to work on graduation requirements or electives. So again, these 3 pieces could overlap if the student plans SMART. And so again, if the student is a psych major at SRJC, the student would need Psych 1A. That is a course that is going to be required for the major. It's also a general education course. Staying with the psych major, the student's going to need statistics. That's going to meet a requirement for their major. It's also going to meet a general education requirement. So as counselors, again, if we know the student's major, we know where they want to transfer to, it's a real streamlined process that we can write that educational plan and assist the student on moving forward to reach their goal. The articulation agreements between Santa Rosa Junior College and four-year universities are really important. And so what an articulation agreement is that a class at SRJC transfers to the four-year university and is equivalent to a course at that university. So for instance, Psych 1A is equivalent to Psych 250 at Sonoma State University. So that class has been articulated. The faculty at Sonoma State have said yes, they've looked at the Psych 1A at SRJC and they have deemed that that class is equivalent to their course. And so that is a major benefit to the student when courses are articulated with the four-year universities. All right, so the CSU versus the UC and the minimum requirements. So the California State University, there are 23 campuses within the CSU system. And so these are ranging from Humboldt all the way down to San Diego and everything in between. So here is Sonoma State, which can kind of tell you right where SRJC is. Sonoma State is our #1 CSU transfer campus, followed behind with Sacramento State and San Francisco State. However, we have students that transfer to almost all of the campuses every single year. So we have a lot of students interested in San Diego State, and if your student is interested in San Diego State, be sure that they understand that it's a very impacted campus, and it's not easy to get into. And so I just like students to be aware of that and to choose their campuses wisely. So they apply to San Diego State, but then they also apply to, Sac State and Chico and CSU LA or something like that. So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. So the CSUs require that students have 60 CSU transferable units, and at SRJC, a CSU transferable unit is any class numbered 1 to 99. So if your child is having to take English 100 to work up into English 1A, those 4 units from English 100 are not CSU transferable, and we would not count them towards the 60 units. Students need to work on their lower division major prep, as I've already stated, and the low unit major prep can complete the CSU GE breadth. So this is the GE pattern for, see if I can get this to open up, for the California State University system. So at SRJC, this is the GE Breath. We call it option B, and it shows the student what courses they need to complete to meet the CSU general education. Now, if your student is majoring in, let's say, engineering, then they're not going to have the time to complete an entire general education pattern, and they would just follow admissions requirements. The admissions requirements would be that the student have all of Area A completed, so speech, English, and critical thinking, that they have B4 completed, which is math, and that they have a total of 30 units completed off of the CSU GE sheet. So let's say that's 15 units from Area A and Area B4. And let's say the student is an engineering student who will be completing Physics 40, 41, 42, and 43. The student would probably also need Chem 1A. The student would need Math 1A and 1B, may have taken Math 27. So completing that 30 units is not difficult for a STEM major or an engineering major or something like that. On the second page of the CSU GE sheet, the student can find campus notes. So for instance, if the student is interested in transferring to CSU Chico, they have a U.S. diversity requirement as well as a global cultures requirement to graduate. If your student took, let's say, History 1.1, that would meet the global cultures requirement. And that History 1.1 is up in Area C. And so there goes that double counting, where the student is getting GE credit and is getting credit for a graduation requirement at CSU Chico. The minimum GPA for transfer to a CSU is 2.0. However, that is not the GPA that we recommend. There are some campuses that are going to admit at the 2.0 level, but there are many more that require a much higher GPA, or there are certain majors that are going to require a much higher GPA. All right, so going to look over at the University of California. So the University of California, get this one to come up. There we go. There's actually 10 campuses, but there are 9 that students can apply to for their undergraduate work. So UC San Francisco is not an option for students who are transferring from SRJC. So our #1 campus for UC transfers is UC Davis, followed by UC Santa Cruz and UC Berkeley. So students like to stay local, but that's not to say that we don't have students that head down south. So the UCs, again, there's 9 campuses that students can look at for transfer. Okay, so students need 60 UC transferable units. At SRJC, those are courses numbered 1 to 47. So if a student takes Speech 60, that class is not UC transferable, only CSU transferable, and so we would not count those 3 units towards their 60 UC transferable requirement. The lower division major prep needs to be completed, and the UCs are pretty picky about this. They want as much lower division major preparation completed as possible, and with some of the UCs and some of the majors, it's a requirement for admissions. So it depends on what campus and what major the student is applying to as far as the amount of major prep that needs to be completed. So this is called IGETC, the Intersegmental General Education Transfer Curriculum. This is option C for the GE options at SRJC. And the IGETC can be used for a student who is looking at transferring to a CSU or a UC. We also recommend that students complete IGETC if they are looking at a California private campus or an out-of-state. And so if your student is unsure where they're headed, they should be following the IGETC. And if they were to come into the counseling office, it's option C or the pink sheet. So admissions requirements for the UC are a little bit different from the CSUs. Students have to have 2 English classes completed. So that would be English 1A. They could take a critical thinking English composition course, which would be English 5, Philosophy 5, or Speech 9. Or for that second semester of English, they could take English 1B. So 2 semesters of English. They need to have math. And then they need 4 classes from at least 2 areas. So let's stick with the engineering student. Again, that student would have chemistry most likely and a lot of physics. And so there's 3 of the classes that they could count. So that 4th class needs to come from another area, social and behavioral sciences or an arts and humanities class. And so the requirements for admissions to a UC are a little bit different. The UCs do require a language other than English when a student is completing IGETC. This is a UC requirement and not a CSU requirement. And so if your student took 2 years of high school coursework in a language other than English, they can use that, or they can take 1 semester of a foreign language here at SRJC. The minimum GPA for a UC is 2.4. However, we do not recommend a 2.4 in applying to the UCs. It really needs to be 3.0 or higher. So a 2.4 student is maybe somebody who right out of high school did not do well in college, took a break from college and then came back and then had all A's, but can't get that GPA up. And that would probably be fine for some campuses, but not all. So UC Berkeley probably not going to get in, even though the student has done quite well. So we really recommend 3.0 and up for transferring into a UC. So concentrating now on the CSU campuses, there are impacted campuses within the CSU as well as impacted majors. So the impacted campuses, 100% impacted, meaning they have more students who apply there than they have room for, are Fresno, CSU Fullerton, Long Beach, San Diego, San Jose State, and Cal Poly San Luis. So those campuses are 100% impacted, and when a student says they want to apply to those campuses, I recommend that, again, they have backup schools that they're applying to. And so if their number 1 choice is San Diego, they can't come in and tell me their second and third choices are Cal Poly and Long Beach. They need to choose a non-impacted campus that they're applying to. The worst is when a student doesn't have a place to go. So if they can apply outside of those impacted campuses, it's going to be in their best interests. The impacted majors vary by school. These are just some common impacted majors, so business, communication, criminal justice, engineering, definitely nursing, and psychology. So when a campus is impacted or a major is impacted, typically the campus has a supplemental application that the student needs to complete, and that is going to look at the student's GPA. They're looking to see if certain classes have been completed with a certain grade. And the student may be admitted to the campus as a pre-major, and then once they finish a certain class or that first semester, they'll be moved into the full major. But it's just something that the student needs to research a little bit to see, am I applying to an impacted campus and or major, and if so, what are the extra requirements that I need to complete? The associate's degree for transfer is a CSU program, and so what this is students are able to complete an associate's degree while completing the CSU transfer requirements. It's really beneficial for students who are preparing for impacted CSU majors and campuses, and for those students that are applying to several CSU campuses. So by completing the associate's degree for transfer, as long as the CSU campus accepts that associate's degree for transfer major from Santa Rosa Junior College, they can just follow the major prep that's listed on the associate's degree for transfer. So it's really important for the student to come in and speak with the counselor about the ADTs and what the requirements are. So when a student gets an associate's degree for transfer, again, they're able to complete a universal lower division major prep for the CSUs that accept the associate's degree for transfer. Of course, they're earning an associate's degree, so that's a benefit. They're guaranteed admission to a non-impacted CSU campus with a similar non-impacted major. They get a slight GPA bump when they are applying to an impacted campus or major, and after transfer, they're required to complete 60 more units. So that last one is really the most beneficial one that I see for students, is that the CSU's end of the bargain is the student is not going to be taking any extra classes, which is a good thing for students and, of course, their pocketbooks. All right, so now switching over to the University of California, pretty much all UCs are competitive for admissions. However, UC Berkeley, LA, and San Diego are the most competitive, but students should be aware that they should research what the selection criteria is and what the campuses are looking for. The most competitive majors at the UCs, I would say, are the sciences, especially biology and chemistry. Definitely engineering is very competitive. Most UCs do not have a pure business major. Students will find it under economics, but that tends to be a competitive or impacted major. Communications is often impacted, and then film and psychology, you'll often find those are competitive to get into as well. And this is just a short list. There's definitely other majors that are competitive at the UC. The selection criteria that the UCs are looking for, number one, is the GPA. So the higher the GPA, the better off for the student getting into the UC. They're also looking at the strength of academic preparation, so how much major prep is completed. And then they're looking at campus and community involvement. And this is outside of high school. And so a lot of students have done a lot of campus or community involvement within high school, and then once they get to the community college, they stop. And we really recommend that they continue doing some type of involvement. Even if they're working, to be involved on campus, to be in a club, or to be tutoring, or mentoring in the elementary school system or something like that. Doing something to help them, that they have the ability to talk about leadership experience and how they've given back to their community is really important. The UCs offer something called the Transfer Admission Guarantee. It's also called the TAG. So students can tag to one campus. However, Berkeley, LA, and San Diego do not participate in the tag. So a student can tag to, let's say, UC Santa Cruz, and then they do the regular admissions application for Berkeley, LA, and or San Diego. If the tag is accepted by UC Santa Cruz, they apply to Berkeley and they get into Berkeley. They don't have to accept the tag from Santa Cruz. But if they did not get into one of those other schools and they have the tag to Santa Cruz that was accepted, they know that they're in and they have that guarantee of going to UC Santa Cruz. Students apply for the tag 1 year in advance in the month of September. And so they would complete the tag application in September. For most UC campuses that participate in the tag, they inform the students in November if their tag has been accepted, and they guarantee that admission as long as the student keeps up their GPA. And so the tag has gotten more and more competitive, and students have to have a certain GPA to complete the tag. And typically for certain majors, they have to have specific courses completed with certain grades to be eligible for the tag. We post the tag criteria. Typically each summer it gets posted as we get the information, and so students can read through that. They can also attend a tag workshop at SRJC to help them through the process. All right, so independent and out-of-state campuses, this is a little bit different. And so students have to really take the initiative and do some research on their own. So like I spoke earlier about articulation, there isn't as much articulation with the independent colleges in California and out-of-state campuses. We have some, but there's not a whole lot. And so the student has to do some research to see what is it that they need to have done. Students really want to be careful and make sure the campus that they're applying to is accredited. And what they're looking for is a regional accreditation process. And so if a college is regionally accredited, they know that those classes they took at that school are going to transfer to another regionally accredited institution. So SRJC is WASC accredited. It's the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. And so there's the Western Association, there's the Northeastern Association, there's the Southern Association. And so that's what the student wants to be looking out for and making sure that it's an accredited campus. So the first step when students are interested in an independent or out-of-state campus is to start gathering information about the campus. The best place to do this is to go on to the campus's website and click on admissions. And then typically they have information for freshmen and then information for transfer students. So they want to see what are the required number of units that the student needs to transfer. Typically, we see 24 units is the most common that students need to have, but there are schools that require less and there are some schools that require more. They want to see about selection criteria. So does the student need to have a certain GPA? Do they need specific courses completed, like a certain level of math? Is there an essay that they need to write? You know, what is the campus requiring of them? What's the general education requirements? Does the campus accept IGETC? And then what are the application procedures and deadlines? What I typically recommend is for the student to contact the four-year university and ask if there's somebody in admissions that works with students in the state of California if it's an out-of-state campus. Typically there is somebody because we're a large state, and so they have somebody that recruits out here and understands what IGETC is and things like that. The second step would be for the student to then visit the counseling office and bring in the information that they found so that the counselor can help them in developing an educational plan. The student can then ask for a review of that plan from the four-year university to see if there is something that they're missing or maybe something that the campus wanted to accept, and so, is there reason to take that class? The fourth step is talking cost. So the average cost of attending a out-of-state or independent campus is about $30,000 a year. And so you really need to have that talk with the student. The student needs to talk with the university. A lot of times private schools and out-of-state campuses offer scholarships and funding, but they need to talk with the campus about that. What kind of financial aid package would I be? You're my number one school, but I just can't afford that price tag. So what can be done? So finding out, how they can bring that cost down a little bit. And then the final step is just to confirm and carry out the plan. So how much does it cost? The cost of attending a CSU. CSUs are the largest system in the nation, and they're also very reasonable. And so a student living at home, the cost is about $16,000. So if your student is going to attend Sonoma State and able to live at home and maybe pay a fraction of rent than what they would pay on their own, that's obviously going to save them money. The CSU says if a student is living on or off campus, the cost is about $24,000. Tuition and fees. So if a student is a full-time student, the fees are about $5,472. And so you can see the bulk of that cost is really in living expenses. The cost of attending a UC for tuition and fees is about $12,240 for full-time enrollment, and that requirement of the UC is that students be full-time. They do not want students to be part-time. They want students to get in and get out and move into the career life or onto graduate school. And then the cost for private and out-of-state universities, it varies from as little as $5,000 to $50,000. So it just depends on the campus and what their requirements are. According to the U.S. News and World Report, the average private tuition and fees for 2016-17 was $33,635. So this is an important conversation to have with your student. What is the family contribution? How much can the family contribute to the child's education? It could be, a nice amount for the student, or it may not be anything. And so the student needs to be prepared for that they are going to be required to take out loans and apply for scholarships and things like that. So it's a really important conversation for families to have together. So resources for financial support. I recommend every family apply for FAFSA. And this is where you're going to get quote-unquote free money from the federal government. It's the Pell Grant and the Cal Grants. And I highly recommend, even if you've applied once and didn't get anything, apply again when the student is getting ready to transfer. The other thing to take into consideration is if, there are 2 children in college, this is going to make your family contribution go down, and so you then may be eligible for help through FAFSA. Scholarships. So SRJC has a very healthy scholarship program. And of course, you're probably familiar with the Doyle, but besides the Doyle, we have the Foundation Scholarships. And these are scholarships that students can apply for every year. The application this year is available January 3rd and is due by March 1st. And this goes right into their student portal under district announcements. It's one application. For the continuing students, it's over 400 scholarships. And for students who are transferring, it's 250 different scholarships. And so I highly recommend students apply for these scholarships the entire time that they're here at SRJC. If they get that continuing student scholarship, but maybe they don't need to use it at SRJC, they can, bank that money for when they do transfer. So highly recommend that students apply for the Foundation scholarships. We also have an online bulletin board where sometimes, there's only 5 here now, but sometimes you're scrolling all the way down. And what I tell students to do is come on once a week and click on new scholarships this week so they can see what are the new scholarships for the week without having to go through each and every one. So that's also an option for students, is the bulletin board. And then they just have some resources. So searching for scholarships, the outside scholarship list that students could look at. So that might be helpful. So just some great offerings for students. There's, of course, institutional scholarships. So through the four-year universities, they should look to see what scholarships they may have. And on the scholarship website, actually, let's see if I can find this very quickly. I'm not sure that I can. I'm going to go into the Transfer Center site really quickly and show you where it is on here. So if the student goes to financial aid scholarships for transfer, and this is just at transfer.sanrosa.edu, they can go by campus and click on that campus to go to the scholarship page for each of those campuses. So that might be helpful. The UCs offer something called the Blue and Gold Plan, and what this is if a family makes less than $80,000 a year and they have applied for FAFSA, then the UC will help in financing the cost of attending the UC, the difference between what the student has received from the FAFSA and what they have left to pay. So they definitely want to look at the Blue and Gold and talk to the UC campus about that opportunity. There's also the California Middle Class Scholarship. So this might be something that students qualify for. So again, they have to apply for financial aid, and it's to provide scholarships that help cover up to 40% of the tuition and fees. And this is for both UCs and CSUs. I'm just pulling this off of the UC page. So if your family income and household assets are under $156,000 per year and you qualify for this scholarship, the California Student Aid Commission and your UC Campus Financial Aid Office will let you know your actual scholarship amount. So again, it's just a question to ask. What about the Middle Class Scholarship Program? Do we qualify for that? If your student is AB 540 or a Dreamer, there's also resources for students that can bring the cost of their education down as well. So the AB 540 would allow the student to, not pay out-of-state fees, and so that will help to bring that down. And then there's the Dreamers who can apply for the Dream Loan, as well as if they've applied for the California Dream Act, then that would offer benefits to them as well. For students that are applying out of state, there's something called the Western Undergraduate Exchange. And what this is for students who are going to attend a campus in one of the Western states. So Oregon, Arizona, Nevada, things like that. And it can bring the cost of attending the university down. So the campus has to participate, and they have to participate for transfer students. So there are some campuses that only participate for freshmen, and so it's important to do that research and see if the campus does accept what we call the WUI for transfer students. So unfortunately, this website is not wanting to come up. See if I can type it in here really quickly. And it looks like it's having some issues. So you can come back onto that or refer your student to that if it's something that they're interested in. All right, so some transfer tips. Deciding on the major, that's huge. And if your student is unsure of their major, a recommendation would be to take Counseling 62. It is a CSU transferable course that is on the CSU GE sheet. And, this class is all about the student. So hopefully they won't be bored and hopefully they find the content somewhat easy because it's all about them. They're researching themselves. So they get the chance to do different assessments and to look at what their personal interests are, as well as, different career fields and things like that. If they're not eligible to take Counseling 62, they may want to take career development or attend workshops in the Career Development Services Department. Another thing for them to do is to meet with university reps. So here at SRJC, we have various reps from different universities come to meet with students. So for instance, we have UC Davis and UC Berkeley and Sonoma State, and we had UCLA come this year. So different reps come and they can talk with students. They may meet with them one-on-one, or they may offer a workshop. And so looking for those opportunities to speak with the different reps. Typically, we have Transfer Day in fall. It's usually in the month of September. And this is an opportunity where students can speak with different reps from about 50 different universities that attend Transfer Day. And they're there to answer questions and to provide information on their transfer campuses. I highly recommend that students work with a counselor each semester. So come in once a semester, check in, make sure everything is still the same. Things can change, and so we want students to be aware of those changes. The next recommendation is Me First, which stands for Math and English. And so students should not be putting off taking math or English. A lot of students, those are subjects that maybe they aren't real fond of, and so they think, well, I'll just do it later, and they're not doing themselves any favors. And so it's best if they can get their math and English done as soon as possible. Getting involved both on and off campus, as I always mentioned, is definitely something that students should do. It's critical to keep a high GPA, so doing well in their classes. Taking the time to visit campuses, so start with a virtual tour, and if they're interested in the campus, then to plan an actual visit. We also do field trips through the Transfer Center, so they can look on our website to see what field trips we're taking for that particular semester to see if they're interested in joining us. And then another recommendation would be to set up, a weekly or a monthly meeting to talk college. And so, you want to be involved in the process. That's why you're obviously watching this video. And a lot of times, traditional age students, some of them are not real fond on giving you a lot of information. And so having an agreement that, hey, let's talk, let's meet, let's figure out what you're doing and where you're going, inform me of what you learned, or, what campuses are you looking at, things like that, just so that you feel you're involved in the process and that you can offer assistance as well. These are just some different web resources that you and your student could check out. So the Transfer Center website. Assist.org is a website where our students can look up what major prep needs to be completed for a CSU or a UC. They can also research the various majors offered at the UC or CSU. CSU Mentor and calstate.edu are CSU websites that can help the student in doing more research. CaliforniaColleges.edu is going to include information on all colleges in California, so community colleges, both the CSU and UC, as well as California independent colleges. And then the University of California website provides a lot of helpful resources and tools for students. So just a couple last minute thoughts here. A lot of students are told just go to the community college for 2 years and do your general education. And as you've learned through this video, that is not what it's all about. The 2 years, it really depends on the student. There's a couple of factors that go into that. One is what level of English and math are they at, and how long is it going to take to get to transferable level work. Secondly, what is their major? If they're in a high unit major that's going to require a lot of courses to be completed, that's going to take time, especially in one of those STEM majors. If they're unsure of their major, that takes time to figure out. And so by the time they figure out their major, then they have to do the major prep. So that is another factor. We know the majority of our students in the community college system are working. And so to do 15 units and to do those 15 units well also takes time. And so a lot of times our students are not at 15 units each semester. Maybe they're at 12, just so that they can be a full-time student. That's another factor. We know students have family responsibilities, so maybe they help at home a lot, or they're helping with younger siblings or with grandparents or something like that. And so that's going to take, time out of their schedule for them. And so again, maybe being at that 15 units to get out of the community college in 2 years just isn't doable. And so I really talk with students about it's an individual path. You're going to go about it in the way that you do. And for a lot of students, that is not being done within 2 years. So just something to think about. So we do offer what's called Transfer 101 for students, and we offer that in person. They can also find the video online. They do need to log in with their student ID number, and then we recommend after they attend or watch the Transfer 101 that they make an appointment with a counselor. So I hope that this has provided you with some general knowledge about the transfer process, and that you encourage your student to come in and see a counselor to get their questions answered.